Welcome back. I've got Joshua Hoecherl on the line. Joshua, how are you?
I'm great. How are you doing?
I am really awesome and
Good.
thankful to have you on the show today. So why don't you share a little bit about you and then we'll jump into this very important conversation.
Awesome. Thank you. I'm excited to be here and grateful for the opportunity to talk a little bit more about leadership. I've been in the consulting space for my entire career. I'm one of those people that came out of education and said, "Well, what am I going to do with my life now? I know. I'll tell other people how to handle their lives and be more effective." Right. So, at a real young age, I started in that and built a couple different consulting companies, and then worked in a couple other spaces as well. But keep kind of hybriding back to that whole consulting coaching space. And the 20 plus years that I've spent doing this has taught me that there's probably more to empowerment and coaching and consulting than I ever thought at the beginning of my career. And so I'm kind of at this last leg, this last little run of what I want to do, and have some messages that I think are important, especially in the market now with all the different workforces that we're dealing with on how to be more effective as a leader, um, and a business owner.
Yeah, and the last 5 years for sure have been
Yeah,
a whirlwind of um, there's going to be so many textbooks written about the last five
seriously.
years
Uh-huh.
because running a business on its own with people and dynamics and multiple generations and all of that is complex enough. Let's throw in what we've been dealing with over the last 5 years into the mix
Right.
too. And I mentioned this on an interview earlier today. I commend everybody. I said you're still vertical. That's
Right.
good.
Right. That's a
Um,
win right there, right?
that's a win. You're still standing. I know you've been knocked down a couple times for sure, if not more. But it, it's one of those things where fortitude, we've heard resilience. A lot of time is like, well, I don't have any other choice. I'm just gonna, do whatever I can to get through this and navigate it and, rely back on my own experiences, try not to go solo on it and, and be with others. And, entrepreneurs and leaders, it's been challenging to say the least. But I think from that, much like anything, we've heard the analogy, a diamond was originally a rock and refined and all
Absolutely.
that stuff. It's the same thing. These things refine us and they actually make us better if we are open to that. And I
That's
think,
right.
casting the victim mindset aside, like, I keep that's not going to help me grow. Like, what
Right.
do I need to do in order to get through this to be get on the other side, whatever that is, or to the next challenge, because there's always going to be opportunities or challenges, depending on how you look at them. But ultimately,
Always.
it all comes down to this beautiful thing we call leadership, and
Hmm.
it's a lot of times it's people coin it. It's a phrase. It's like no, it's an entity. It's an existence.
Love that.
It's a living, breathing thing. And throughout your career, you've done, as you said, a lot of things, but there's a component to it, and it was one of the reasons why I really wanted to chat with you. Is you mentioned quite a bit heart-centered leadership,
Yeah.
and I from when I see that. I know what it means from my perspective, but I want to hear it
Sure.
from yours. What does that mean for you? Not, and if you want, you can provide a definition of it, but what does that mean for you? And what do you get from it
Yeah.
that makes such a big difference and why that's how you operate?
Yeah. That's a great question. We're all in this same space as we're trying to build businesses. I had a meeting with my staff yesterday morning that just, again, opened my eyes to the importance of looking from heart-centered leaderships. And there's so many different facets of that, right? I mean, obviously, being an empathetic leader, right? That's something that's being talked about a lot right now, is empathy driven leadership, and how to manage and communicate with so many different perspectives and mindsets and visions that are out there. But really, to me, at the end of the day, I'm a numbers guy, which is a weird thing for me to be talking about heart-centered leadership, right? Because I'd rather just see things on a spreadsheet and say, okay, the numbers tell me this, I'm going to go do this. But I learned the hard way through lots of failure, which is the best way to learn, right? Lots of failure, that the second I let numbers dictate my decisions, I always run into trouble. So I had to find the other side of the coin. I had to find where I could take the things that my head was saying and mix them with what my heart, my intuition, my gut, whatever you want to say, however you want to call it, was telling me, even when it was counterproductive between the two. And so I've worked really hard to determine how do I get to a point where I can meld the head and the heart together to create real vision and clarity, right? Because it's two sides of the coin. You can go way too far one way where it's just, yeah, I'm doing everything on gut. I'm throwing everything against the wall, and what works works, and I move forward. And that's painful too in and of itself, right? You talk about the entrepreneurship and the leadership journey being lonely and difficult. It is, especially when things are hard, right? So for me, the concept of heart-centered leadership is driven from the perspective of, I take my data, I take my information, I take my processes, all critical things to run a business, and I run them through the lens of, what ripple effect am I creating in all of this, right? Because we always create ripple effects, positive or negatively. Are the results of what I'm doing creating growth and opportunity, not just for my business, but for the people that I work with, the people who work for me, the people who are vendors, my clients. And if I don't see positive changes from the ripple effects, and let me be clear, positive doesn't always mean easy, right? Sometimes positive is hard. But if I'm not seeing positive effects from those things, if those ripple effects aren't creating waves of transformation that make a difference in people's lives, I'm not leading with heart at that moment. So it's been a major transformation for me over the course of my career, but has become so critical, I think, especially the way that leadership is moving and the direction that our workforce is moving.
Yeah, just being someone that will actually listen to understand instead of
Eight.
listening to respond is so critically important because
Yeah.
and I mentioned this ironically. It's funny how when I have these interviews, they schedule how they schedule, but
Sorry.
sometimes the days have themes to them, and today seems to
Interesting.
be this theme. I don't think that's accidental. I'm running with it, but one of the things that you know, and I mentioned this before on the show. I took over a very toxic healthcare organization. They had tons
Mm,
of turnover. No one trusted anybody. It was just a mess, and really high turnover. And after a year, that turnover was basically zero.
awesome.
And I just listened.
Yeah.
I mean, there was more to that, of course, but I just listened, and I asked them. I went, okay, if you were sitting in my seat and you were running
Mm,
this, what would you do? Because I wanted to hear, one, if they had any ideas, but secondly, I wanted them, hopefully, if and they trusted me with this, to
yeah.
kind of peel back their own curtain and say, this is what I feel is important for what we do here as an organization. And it
Yeah.
was able to harmonize that with, a few dozen people. And there was a commonality there. It's like, okay, well, now I've got that commonality. We can build from that. And we did that and restored trust, encouraged them, like, what are you seeing that I'm not seeing? And because you see things I don't. I'm not in that room with you and the patient when you're diagnosing or if you're talking with
Yeah.
them as a mental health worker. I'm not in that room. What are you seeing? What are some of the things that you're noticing? I want you to be thinking about these things. I know because sometimes in the day to day of work, you get in a rut or routine and things like that. But keep track, be observant of what's going on, and from there, we say, okay, we're seeing an uptick in this. Maybe we should launch a new program to help address that or partner with another agency that's doing that so we don't have to reinvent the wheel. Just kind of whatever we're doing is with the ultimate goal to be able to serve our community. And all of a sudden they started getting that, the appetite where they have an idea, they put it forward, it's celebrated. I mean, there was one in particular where there was basically we were part of an association and our organization was recognized for a program that we had launched.
Mm,
And before that, being a toxic place, I'm surprised they let them in the door, much less, attend the conference. They're like, we don't,
yeah.
ooh, you've got scabies. Stay over
Yeah.
there. No,
We know
but
who you guys are.
yeah, they did. They did. I knew who they were before I went in. And people are like, "Are you crazy?" And of course, the answer is yes. But
Yes.
I'm gonna do this anyway, because I feel there's an opportunity here to do good, and
Yeah.
we did, and I'm
It's
thankful for
awesome.
that. But at the end of the day, it boils down to creating this environment where people have the opportunity to thrive. They always say,
Right.
how do I get more productivity out of my people? Well, create an environment where they can thrive. Give them the success, give them all the tools that they need to do it. They still have to do it. You can't
Right.
do it for them. You
Right.
Just like a coach, you call in the plays, you position the players, whatever you need to do. You give them all the tools, the training, the expertise, and then you say, go. And
Go to
then
work.
it's up to them to do it. But create that environment where they can be successful. If you
Yeah.
don't create that environment, they won't. And all of a sudden, it just turns into a mess. And
Yeah.
again, with the goal of, I want them to thrive. And you had mentioned, some of the work you're doing with your teams. Instead of entrepreneurial, it's more intrapreneurial, which is
Yes.
um, building on their own strengths to let them grow. And a lot of people go, well, if you do too much of it, they're going to be so good, they're going to leave. Well,
Ah,
as the running joke goes, well, what if we don't do anything and they stay?
that's
And
right.
so, talk to me about this entrepreneurial work that your team's doing now.
Yeah, it's a big thing for us right now. It's become the foundation of everything we teach with all of our clients and everything that we're putting out from a content perspective. But it kind of came to me because of some difficult situations where I had a former business partner that I wasn't really leading very effectively. And I thought I was leading because I'd say, okay, here's the numbers, here's how we do things. And then I listened, right? What do we need to do next? And so I felt like I was doing all the right things. But then when that partnership soured a little bit and I ended up buying that partner out of the company we were involved in, it was one of those aha moments where I realized, okay, I didn't do anything to give this partner that was a successful business owner. I wasn't giving him any opportunity to be the best version of himself. And so I had to really take a step back and recognize what is it that I'm doing here? And that's kind of where the entrepreneurial leader system kind of started to develop for me. Our foundational concept and thought process behind everything that we do are just some real core principles. We obviously want good, solid leadership, but it's about ownership and accountability for each one of those positions. If we can build a structure and a position with processes and metrics that show someone, here's how you do your job, because as business owners we have three main responsibilities with our employees. We got to pay them. That's the easy one. It's the most painful one, but it's transactional, right? You give me this, I give you that, right? We got to give them a way to do their job. We've got to give them the training and the tools to do the base level of their job. And then the third one, which is really where the entrepreneurial leader system took off for me, is we have to give them an opportunity to progress. We have to give them an opportunity to grow. Not all of them are going to take it, obviously, right? But we have to provide that pathway for them. And so giving them the ability to have ownership and accountability over their own individual roles, making them, mini CEOs of whatever they need to do, has been invaluable. But there's some tricks to it, right? You have to make sure that you have continuous innovation. You have to make sure you have things like cultural alignment, and then really focus on that ripple effect that I was talking about. What impact are we making beyond just our doorstep or our box that we're working in, and how is that affecting the organization and the community as a whole? You mentioned community, and Michael, community is so critical right now. People are just hungry for community. I mean, look at the whole aspect behind social media is we want to build these communities, and people are just hungry for it. And if we don't do a good job inside our internal organizations of creating a space of community, and community thrives on everyone becoming involved and everyone becoming engaged and everyone sharing their ideas. The question that you asked those employees, what would you do in my shoes? Man, that is a powerful question, because that shifts everyone's mindset into a united, combined effort to make things better, as opposed to, look, you do your thing, I'm going to do my thing, and hopefully somewhere in the middle we're not going to bump up against each other.
Yeah, the environment was very siloed, and it was like,
Ah, so painful.
let's break down these barriers. And that's one of the challenges that we saw, especially in the early days of the pandemic, was
Mm,
when people were all separated and we weren't allowed to work in the same spaces with each other for a period of time. It just was. You had to be intentional, and
yeah.
the strong organizations said, okay, we're going to fumble through this. Is it going to be clunky? Yes.
Yes.
It's going to be very clunky. Or, I think back to a conference that I attended in Vegas, and it was an entrepreneur conference, and the speaker had said, you know what? Everybody's so focused on building their perfect version of this. Put out crap 1.0 and then release
Abs-
crap 2.0 and then 2.5 and 3 and 3.11 and 4. I mean, come on.
Absolutely.
Windows is up to what? Windows 11 still
Right.
still got some crap to it. They're going to
Absolutely.
release a new one. It's like you continue to improve on it, and
Yeah.
but you have to have that focus of like, okay, this is the reality of it.
Hmm.
Yet, and that's one of those difficult things, like what is the reality? And it's hard to separate the emotion from it because we are emotional creatures, most of us. And sometimes it's really frustrating, but it's like, okay, let's park the emotion over here. We're not ignoring it. We're just going to say, could you sit over here for a second? We just want to look
Right.
at this is the reality of the situation right now. Okay, what are some ideas? Throw them out there. What comes to your mind that we could try?
Mm.
And nothing sounds silly because what we're doing right now obviously is not working well. So
Right.
what are some ideas? And when people have that freedom and security to be able to just throw crap at the wall and go, all right, how about this? Like, okay,
Yeah.
let's try that. Or what do you think about that? Or maybe we could do this. And the teams that did that were able to quickly navigate through the remote side of things to the point where it's like, okay, we figured out the nuances. It's still not the best, but we're
Yeah.
better at it than before. And most of us are getting over the trauma of getting that Teams invite. Like we
Right.
go in
Right.
like, ugh,
Oh, here we go again.
we hear that Outlook ding, and we're like, you know.
Yep.
Expletive, expletive, it's like if you work in an environment and that's what you're doing, turn the switch and switch your mindset to say, okay, this is an opportunity for me to serve,
Yeah.
whether it's being in a meeting or to
Love that.
respond to an email. It's a mind shift thing. And when I work with people that are burned out and there's multiple people in an organization and people doing similar work are not burning out, and those are, a lot of it is mindset. And like,
Absolutely.
let's change this a little bit. Turns the dial down a bit, and all of a sudden they're like, this actually isn't as bad because they're bringing other things into their life, into work that, and because life is hard. I get it.
Yeah, for
But
sure.
and it's important. And I think as leaders, whether we are the leader of an organization or we're a leader of a department or we're a coworker, and you can still be a leader if you're one of those folks.
Everyone's a leader if they do the things right, right?
Yeah, lead the way of, okay, if you see
Right.
somebody struggling, you know, what's going on? Is there
Yeah.
anything I can help you with? And
Yeah.
and just it eases it a little bit. So it takes away that isolation feeling that so many people feel when they're burned out or stressed or having a tough
For
go
sure.
of it. They feel like they're the only person on the planet that's dealing with this. Like,
Yeah.
odds are you're not, but I understand why people feel that way. But again, it's that intention and reinvestment in your team. And
Right.
one of the things that you said early on that jumped out at me as well is the work that you're doing internally is very similar, if not almost the same, to the work that you're doing with your clients, which
Absolutely.
means which strengthens your product because we're doing this internally, so we know what we're seeing. And when you're working with clients and you're seeing the results from that work, you can harmonize it together. And what it does is it just makes for a stronger offering for the work you're doing, but it also makes for a stronger organization. All of a sudden,
That's right.
you have this ecosystem that's just flowing, and people are in the groove. Is a good example. They're just flowing, and when you're working and you're in a flow like that, I tell you what, Monday hits and you're like, okay, let's go. I want to
That's
get
right.
started instead of, oh no, it's
Yeah.
Monday, you know, and
Absolutely.
and that's I hated that existence of, oh, it's Monday. No, I hated that. I
Yeah.
like life shouldn't be that way. So either A, I got to figure out how to do it differently, or B, win the lottery. It's probably going to be a lot. The stats tell me it's going to be easier if I figure out a way because the
That's
lottery,
exactly right.
yeah, yeah. You'll win the
It,
lottery
it,
when you don't need it.
it goes back to that idea of intentional. I love that word. That's one of my favorite words, right? Like I tell my staff, I tell my clients, I tell my teams, look, I would rather look at and really unpack what the intention behind this is. The results are important, but sometimes the results are less important than what the intention behind it was, right? The results are things we can learn from, we can gain knowledge from, we can, enjoy the success of those results, positive, whatever it is. But without the intention, that there's no fuel there, right? There's nothing that gets us to the next level or to the next step. So I love the word intention and intentional. And so many business owners and leaders that I work with just really struggle with the idea of intention, because it's just, well, we do this because it's what we've always done. We do this because corporate America has always done it this way. We do it because of X, Y, and Z. And that's not intentional, right? That's just rote. We're doing the same thing over and over again. So we teach people to spend a lot of time really unpack and understand what your intention is. Why do you do what you do, right? I mean, the great Simon Sinek, right? Let's unpack the why and figure out why we do what we do, and get those intentions lined up with what our vision is, because that's a whole heck of a lot easier than trying to get somebody else to do what we want them to do.
Yeah, it's and I bring this up a lot in the show. I worked for a nonprofit several years ago, and the board of directors all had amazing ideas of what they wanted the business to do. But finally, one of the board members, a very strong, opinionated Italian man.
Mm-hmm.
I loved him because he told it. He was quiet, but when he spoke, kind of like my dad. When he spoke, you listen. And he finally stood up. Everybody's sitting around this board table. He stood up and he goes, "People, who are we?"
Huh. Wow.
And they're like, "Well, what?" It's like, "No, who are we? What do we do here? What is our Don't look at the posters on the wall. What
Love
is
that.
our mission? Why are we here? What are we trying to do? What's the core? Start with the foundation. These other things, great ideas, but do they take us away from what we're doing?" And I
Mm.
grew up in Detroit, and I remember the 80s when General Motors was involved in satellite dishes and banks and all this other stuff. It's like, you make cars,
Right. And
and
you
they
do it
work.
well.
Well, they did, and then they
Good point.
started
Good point.
focusing on all this other stuff. And well, my multiple generations worked for Generous Motors, so I
You
have
know
some.
the ins and outs.
I know some skin in the game in there. Um, so And ironically, my grandmother used to work for the wife of the CEO of GM in the 1950s, which I found out
Wow.
like 2 years ago. I'm like, what? She worked. Oh, how did I not know this?
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's one of those things. I wish I would have spent a little bit more time with my grandmother, and I spent a ton with her. She's been gone for over 2 decades. But I mean,
Wow.
it's like some of the stories like of the things that she did. It was like, whoa, that's so cool. But getting back to what I was saying is,
Yeah.
you know, GM lost their way, and then the competition came by, and Toyota, for example, went, okay, thanks for that. We're just going to take that market share.
Right.
If they would have focused on who they were and make sure that their customers were being met and meeting the ever-changing demands of what people wanted, it would have likely never happened, or at least to the degree that it did. And it's just a good reminder for organizations that, yeah, we're thriving, but when you start saying, well, this is how we've always done it, be careful, because
Yeah.
there's a
Yeah.
laundry list of companies that this is how we always did it, and they're written about because they no longer exist, and
Yeah.
you don't want to end up that way. It doesn't matter if you're a small company or a Fortune 500 company. We've seen some of the biggest companies on the planet vanquish because
Yeah.
this is how we do it.
Well, full circle back to one of the first things you said, right? The second we stop listening, whether it's our employees, our customers, our vendors, our community at large, innovation is obviously always going to stop, because if we're innovating just based upon what's in our own minds, we're missing the boat as leaders.
Absolutely. And that's words to live by. So, loved our
Absolutely.
conversation, Joshua. Where can people
Me too.
find more about you and the awesome work you do?
Just go visit our website, pp as in pinpoint, ppmanagement.com. You can find all about us there. You can link to our socials. We're pretty active on social media right now. We're putting a lot of good content out through YouTube and through Instagram, and come check us out and talk to us. And we love having these kind of conversations. So
It's awesome. Yeah, I'll definitely have all that in the show notes. So thank you
Thank you.
again for being you and being an inspiration to our listeners, and just continuing to grow your own business and helping other businesses grow. It just makes our country so much better when we have organizations like yours doing all this work. So I really appreciate your time today.
Great. Thank you so much, Michael. I appreciate everything you're doing.